Well, good afternoon. Thank you so much for sticking around. I know it's been a long day today. Very familiar faces, some new faces, and very excited to be able to be here with what we consider the last panel, even though that tomorrow we have an amazing day as well. Tomorrow there is a great panel in the morning, bankability of projects, that is kind of tied or related to this one we're going to be conducting today. Let me just take advantage of the fact that I have amazing colleagues here, and this is going to be really a world-class panel. And let me just introduce you to some of my panelists. First, we have Laura Femenías. Laura is the Deputy Director for the Puerto Rico P3 Authority. Basically, her responsibilities are implementing all the P3 program, both from a policy perspective and a guidelines perspective, as well as the advancement of the different processes, particularly on unsolicited proposals. That is the one we're going to be discussing today. Prior to that, Laura comes from the Puerto Rico Tourism Company, where she was a deputy director there. And as you may figure out, she's a corporate lawyer, she's an attorney, and before that she was in the private sector practice. Let me introduce then Fernando. Fernando is from Sacyr. He is in charge of business development for the Americas, US, and Canada. Basically, Fernando leads the P3 division within Sacyr. He's been there for the last 3 years working with Sacyr. Before that, he was over 6 years working with FCC. Fernando is a civil engineer with formal training on P3 and concessions. And then we have Brien Desilets. Brien is a principal at GrantThornton, is the infrastructure advisory head for the Americas. Brien has an amazing experience doing P3 and infrastructure advisory services all over the continent. He has worked with GrantThornton, but before that, he was with Clark Consulting, PFM, that is a well-known financial advisor in the sector. And before that, he worked as an independent consultant for several years, working for the Institute of Public-Private Partnerships, Radian Guarantee, and Fannie Mae. Brien is an economist, and he also, his grad school, he speaks Spanish. We should do this panel in Spanish because your grad school is, it was University of Barcelona in Spain. So I would like to start once introductions have been made, to let you know, guys, what is, just to be sure, we are all talking about, we feel comfortable in a kind of a common ground about unsolicited proposal. I just Google unsolicited proposals, right? And I'm going to read to you what Google says. It is a written application for new and innovative ideas submitted to a public agency on the initiative of the offeror for the purpose of obtaining a contract with the government. And it is not in response to a request for proposal. So basically we're saying here that as per Google's definition, there is not an RFP, an RFQ, or any public soliciting process involved, and innovation is key to qualify an unsolicited proposals. Given that differentiator of what an unsolicited proposal is, especially when we compare it to a public procurement process, right? A traditional procurement process or a P3 led by the public agency. I think as part of that framework for our discussion, it will be extremely useful if we see what has happened so far within the unsolicited proposals world in Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico has been very active in P3s. We have been hearing that all day long. 20 years ago, even when in the rest of the US or even Latin America, in some very few countries where P3 P3 is being done, we have the Moscoso Bridge here under a P3 procurement structure. We also had, in 2011, the toll road, then the airport, but it's been a while since we have had major P3 procurement process. However, it seems to me, and Laura is going to walk us over that we have had a little bit of activity in the unsolicited proposal market, and we're going to see that in a timeline that we have put together. Can we have that timeline, David? Okay, here it is. Laura, maybe if you can walk the audience through, what's been happening lately in terms of unsolicited proposals and projects that have been presented to the authority by the private sector?
Sure. Well, first of all, everyone, we want to thank you for being here on behalf of the government of Puerto Rico for participating on our second P3 Summit. For us, it's really excitement to show that support from the market and the different industries participants that are over here today with us. So let me introduce myself. I'm Laura, I'm the Deputy Executive Director of the Public-Private Partnership, and I want you a little bit of background of unsolicited proposals and this administration commitment to pursue partnerships that can promote services and operations better for the citizens of Puerto Rico. So once we came into office, actually the first act passed by the governor of Puerto Rico was Act 1 of 2017, which amended Act 29 of 2009. That is the regulatory framework for the P3 partnerships. And the biggest amendment there was the introduction of the unsolicited proposals and the pre-development agreements. Moreover, we want to flexibilize the market and recognize the participation of the local people in order to get certain competitive advantages now when we are in the procurement process. As you see, that took place in January 2017, and then we had the first summit on April 2017, which we clearly made the commitment to try to pursue that inactivity that for many years before we were facing in order to demonstrate that Puerto Rico was open for business and is still open for business. I think right now, at this cornerstone, we have so many opportunities to move forward, and that's why we're here today, just to continue to promote the investment opportunities that you have here in the island. Afterwards, we continue with the unsolicited proposals here, and then we were hit by Hurricanes Irma and Maria. Nevertheless, you will see that the 7 projects that we're pursuing through the unsolicited proposals have continued to move forward, most of them in the energy sector. And we're really, really happy to announce now that I think May 2017 and June 2017, we already have 2 published studies of disability and convenience for 2 different projects, one of utility scale projects for energy sector and another for the touristic ports for Puerto Rico that are already published and ready for your comments in order to move forward. So I think the commitment is clear that despite the hurricanes, despite maybe the fiscal conditions, we are ready to continue to move forward with the private sector, which we think are our biggest supporters out there in order to promote the much needed investment that we need in the island.
Laura, thank you for that. Just to entertain some numbers, how many projects did you receive from launching until the end of 2017 and now during this, the course of 2018?
We received in 2017 around 21 unsolicited proposals.
Okay.
In this year, we have received around 4 unsolicited proposals. From those, we're pursuing 7 different projects in different sectors.
That's excellent. That's great statistics. So people, definitely you have some ears on this agency willing to entertain, unsolicited proposals. I guess that for the benefit of the discussion, we can address I would like to think about 3 blocks of topics, right? One that is more related to the opportunities and the projects that are out there. Another one that is going to be talking a little bit about market appetite and investors' needs, let's say. What an investor needs to feel comfortable with an unsolicited proposal process. And then at the end, we can try to wrap those topics into, well, how within this framework and this historic performance of the agency, how the agency envisions the future of unsolicited proposals, looking ahead of the necessities of Puerto Rico, but also on the, how this market assessment, if you will, that we're going to be performing in these two prior blocks. So to start with that, I will say, and this is a question for Fernando. Fernando, do you think that in terms of unsolicited proposals, which are the projects that are better fit? Those projects that have the critical size. We were mentioning this morning about the necessity of have larger projects or have smaller projects with a continuous pipeline, or maybe bundle those projects. So the question is size critical, or is the type of project more critical, or are both elements critical in terms of determining when a project is a better fit for an unsolicited proposal?
Yeah. Hi, how are you? Good afternoon. So for addressing your question, Alfonso, I'll go a little bit back to your definition of unsolicited proposal. An unsolicited proposal, it is not a surprise proposal, okay?
Exactly.
So that goes in the line that you received 24, 20-something unsolicited proposals a few years ago. Now you receive 4. I think Puerto Rico should aim to receive less unsolicited proposals, but the rate of acceptance should be higher than that. So why I say this, because the important are the good projects. It doesn't matter the size. It doesn't matter the type. The important for investors like Sacyr are good projects. That's what we are looking for. So, of course, the good question is, what is a good project, right? So I think that the agency have to think on who is the counterparty. As us, as investor, we think who is the counterparty. That is authority. In our case, the authority have to look the investors as an entity that is willing to deploy equity in a project in that location.
Correct.
And that is more or less about it. Okay, it has some additional things, but that is more or less about it. So for us to start spending money or investing money on studies, designs, and things like that, we have to go through committees, like all the investors in this market. So we are going to receive questions from our senior management.
Absolutely.
How is the legislation that will support our investment of money toward that unsolicited proposal?
Sure.
How does it work? How's the process? Do we have to speak first to the governmental agency that will be the counterparty for the project before going to the Puerto Rico P3 authority? So with whom do we speak first?
Counterparty. Exactly.
Yeah, to which counterparty, right? We have an idea. We need, I don't know, a cable car from point A to point B.
Correct.
To whom do we have to speak first with Laura and with Omar? Or do we have to speak first with the Ministry of Transportation of Puerto Rico? I don't know.
Correct.
So all that goes in line of what a good project is. A good project has to be backed by good guidelines, a roadmap of, do you want to do an unsolicited proposal? This is the roadmap for unsolicited proposals in Puerto Rico. You have to go from point A to point B, and you have to go through this process. So that's why I mean it is not a surprise. It's not a surprise proposal. It's an unsolicited proposal. The only difference is that the government is not asking for it. We are taking the initiative toward, but we need a process to it. So the type is not relevant. The size is not relevant. Of course, I mean a size over 2 billion, 5 billion, of course, is relevant. But between $0 and $2 billion, it doesn't matter the size. What we need are good projects.
Correct.
Something that we can take to our committees and we get approvals to invest in the initial design, initial initial investment, and then to get a project, invest, get the financing, et cetera, et cetera.
Perfect. Yeah, one element that maybe goes along the lines of what you were mentioning and is in the Google definition that I just read at the beginning was this, it has to be new and it has to be innovative. And I want to ask you, Brien, being an advisor that has seen so many things and you have advised so many of the players, sometimes you advise the private sector when they're preparing a bid for an unsolicited proposals, or sometimes when they're preparing a bid for a competitive process. Sometimes you advise the public sector agencies, right, in their procurement process. Sometimes you advise financiers who are financing one of these projects. So from that perspective, and the different procurements, that are associated with your different roles, how did you qualify the sensitivities toward confidentiality? And I would like to link confidentiality to intellectual property, right? Because one goes hand in hand with the other. When you guys are proposing a project, part of that requirement that you outlined, Fernando, of having some sort of clarity on how the process is conducted is also clarity on how the confidentiality associated with my proposal that sometimes relies on a competitive advantage that I have or on the intellectual property that I have developed, how it's going to be treated, right? So I guess my question to you, Brien, is I assume there are sensitivities with those two elements, right? Yep. In your experience, which are those sensitivities and how you have seen those sensitivities being addressed in other markets? And I don't know if you might have an anecdote of either a great success or yeah, sure, one of those failures that we call this after best practices.
No, first let me say thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I was speaking earlier, so a lot of my colleagues said, "Oh, why are you going to Puerto Rico? They had a hurricane. There's nothing going on down there." And I'm amazed. I mean, there's really a lot happening here. There's a dynamic market and lots of opportunity. And I think just to take a step back, I mean, I also think the P3 authority itself deserves some praise. I mean, just the structure of it is quite impressive. It's, in my mind, a model for the country. There's no other multi-sector P3 authority in the U.S. I think the only thing that comes close is maybe the Indiana Finance Authority. So I think Puerto Rico is really leading the way in P3s. Certainly right now it has the most dynamic P3 market in the U.S., and the unsolicited proposal track is just reconfirming that and opening up a lot of new opportunities. I think the unsolicited proposal track is the source of innovation. This is one of the rationales for P3s overall, to say we want to bring in the private sector's innovation, we want to bring the private sector's new approaches. Well, there's no better way to access that than to open up the unsolicited proposal track. We can see, one of the examples we talked about before the panel was in California, the desal plant, the Poseidon Group is building out there. There's been, this is a state where there's kind of the pendulum swinging back against P3s lately, and yet here's a technology, right? A new breakthrough technology that just offers clear benefits, that indisputable benefits. Californians know they have a water crisis. The price is less of an issue for that reason. They know they're going to have to pay for the water. They're ready to pay more for a secure supply of water. So this fits right into economic need. The project, for that reason, enjoyed social support, political support, and it got done. It received tax-exempt financing allocations. So that's a great example, I think, of bringing new technologies in. When I started at GrantThornton, I said, we're going to have a broad practice here, and we're going to focus on the growth areas of infrastructure. The exciting aspect of the infrastructure market right now is that the technology revolution has finally come to the infrastructure space. This is a tech revolution we've seen in the consumer, industries for a long time, with our gadgets, with entertainment systems, with all kinds of other things. Now it's in the infrastructure space: autonomous vehicles, drones, smart cities. this is the exciting field of infrastructure. And I think, people have been saying this all day in different ways, but that's really the exciting opportunity in infrastructure. Unsolicited proposals are the way to capture that. And I think when it's used for those reasons, the rationale is obvious. There's less debate about it. There's less argument about it, because the fact that you're bringing a new technology, a new solution that serves a need, not just a fun gadget, but something that's serving a need, reducing a cost, improving a service. And my advice goes to both sides of the aisle, right? I mean, I'm advising a private bidder. How can you ensure me that this is going to be well received? Well, is it a new technology that meets a public need? Then the authority is going to love it, right? So it's the same advice I'd offer to both sides, and I think that's when we see things move forward. And I think P3 authorities following that mode.
Yeah. You want to add something?
Yeah, and if I may jump, the truth of the matter is that we have to be innovative, but we also have to be responsible. At some point earlier this morning, we can't sacrifice public policy. So clearly the private sector also have the same challenges, maybe from the fiscal situation or position, is we have to file different unsolicited proposals that we can work together with the reforms that we're aligned with the certified fiscal plan, because we have to take those factors in consideration. Maybe you have the best proposal, but if it doesn't comply with the fiscal plan, you put the authority in a position that is difficult to pass through the screening process and say, let's move on. So that's one of the factors. And I also want to jump on one of Fernando's comments, that the truth of the matter is that unsolicited proposal, as it's framed as of today, is really broad what people can come up with innovation and the technology side of how can we lead and move forward in order to promote different projects that are clearly needed in Puerto Rico. So we believe, and I want to use this as the stepping stone to announce this, we're clearly very committed in order to promote that transparency to the private sector that incentivizes the mechanism of unsolicited proposals. And we are currently working in a guideline to use uniform process, transparent process. Those guidelines have been developed with the help of our advisors here from Arup, and we're going to publish those to receive comments. And one of those main areas that we want to be pretty clear on with the private sector is the confidentiality of information.
Absolutely.
How are we going to protect your trade secrets, that you feel safe, that you do business here with us at the authority? And to that matter, the Act 2089 already provides that the unsolicited proposal that you file at the authority should mark what information should be confidential in order for us to protect those trade secrets of all your businesses and all your business methods. And if you have doubts, the regulation provides to have meetings in order to screen that and that we protect the information that you will provide to the authority to promote business. If we're going to be your partner, you have to feel comfortable.
Correct.
And clearly, that's our intention on behalf of the authority.
Well, that's excellent news. I didn't know you were, going to announce, if you will, that you are leading the process of kind of reframing and redrafting and improving, if you will, the original guidelines of back in 2017, and we're honored to be helping the authority in that regard. And eventually, when this document is ready, I guess part of that process is going to be having the opportunity to present it to the market and to collect some reactions. We don't want to call it a sounding market process, but it's going to be more like an industry review where different stakeholders to a P3 procurement, investors, lenders, bidders, consultants, give their honest feedback to those guidelines that basically are going to try to set up that process you were mentioning before, Fernando, in a clear way. That's great news, Laura. Going back to the confidentiality and the technology that you were mentioning before, Brien, and probably, I guess this is a question I'm going to put to the floor and see how each one of you look at that. Technology has the advantage that may address in a more expedite, efficient way an infrastructure need. But also, if it's not a proven technology, if it is a new technology, then not only the agencies, the owners are reluctant to embrace it, but also the financiers, right? It becomes a bankability issue, and probably they're going to be talking about that tomorrow in the panel about bankability. So my question is, to what extent technology has to be mature enough to be able to create that minimum level of comfort for the authority being the owner of the project, but also to all of those who are going to be putting the money into the project, right? I don't know if maybe Fernando or Brien.
I mean, the phrase I'd use, and not every jurisdiction wants to get into this business, but I think the appropriate phrase is living laboratory. And this is really a feature of the smart city space that a lot of these technologies are new. And so, no, we don't want to sign a 30-year deal to rely on this service, but that doesn't mean we're not interested in it at all, right? So I think different cities are saying, what can we do to foster this type of innovation? And think about, the supply chain, right? Because doesn't everybody want an innovative economy? Don't you want your tech university partnered up with startups and spin-offs and all kinds of things? So,
Exactly.
And I'm not sure the P3 authority is necessarily the agency to manage some of this. Maybe so, but we work with an autonomous vehicle company right now, and I was frustrated with them because they're not ready to supply the vehicles. They said, "Oh, we need an operator. We're just designing the thing," and so everybody gets excited about it, but neither side is ready to sign a contract. But when we look at places where there's a tech university that maybe has a workshop and they have some roads designated for testing, and that's a different concept. And I think we can look at I think Los Angeles DOT is doing some very innovative work in trying to foster different types of innovation. But this is with the tech revolution coming into infrastructure, I'd say, and we're very familiar with this risk management terminology in P3s. What becomes the dominant risk is technology risk, right?
Right.
Even something as basic as a bike rack, 2 years later is obsolete because now we have dockless bikes, and that's not a huge capex, but still, you've spent potentially, if municipalities set these up, you spent thousands of dollars, building these bike racks. You've taken up, portions of the sidewalk. 5 years later, these things are obsolete. So that's a very new challenge, I think, for cities to get around. But there may be, new types of P3s to look at, or maybe old types of P3s. These university research partnerships or real estate partnerships. It's great that the P3 Authority has folks like Laura with the real estate background who understand that there are very complex and dynamic and various ways for the public and private sectors to work together. Not necessarily a 30-year concession isn't necessarily always the right approach. So
Yeah, I agree. And innovation is generally, in our experience, what we have seen is that normally innovation and this fact that, that on the private sector, they can figure out a new solution to an old problem, or a new solution to a problem that the public sector hasn't yet figured out how they're going to be targeting, how they're going to be aiming at in terms of how to address the concerns of the users is key, right?